built our home on Barren River Lake in 2012, but didn't move in permanently until 2015. About the time we were building our home, I learned about the importance of native plants in attracting pollinators and other beneficial insects, some that serve as food for the birds we love to watch from our windows. The plants also provide food and shelter for insects and other wildlife. Native plants bloom at precisely the time that they are needed by pollinators, and unlike most non-native species, they act as a host plant, providing food for all stages of insect life. My goal was to have a yard made up of almost entirely native plants and no lawn. Unfortunately, we had to plant grass seed for erosion control when we initially built our house, since we were not here full-time to start a garden. So by the time we moved in, we had a big mess of grass, weeds, and random wild native plants that I couldn't identify. I did begin to add a few plants each time we visited, which helped form the backbone of my design. I was not a gardener, and I had no experience in designing gardens or landscapes, so everything I did was based on enthusiasm. So this is how I went about creating my garden. Research, existing wildflowers, weed control, the right plant for the right place, intent, and joy. To do my research, I read anything I could find about gardening with native plants. I studied websites, collected brochures, catalogs, and newspaper and magazine articles. I checked out books from the library and made copies of pictures that inspired me. I joined the Kentucky Native Plant Society and used their Facebook page for plant identification and assistance. I've also attended their meetings and taken wildflower walks, and I have learned a lot from friends more knowledgeable than I. In order to use existing wildflowers in my yard, I had to identify everything that came up to determine if it was a desirable plant or a weed. Then I moved them around if necessary to suit my needs. I also moved a few plants from a vacant lot that we owned across the street. I prefer not to use herbicides to control weeds, though I will admit I've been desperate enough to use Roundup selectively. I have spent a lot of time on my hands and knees pulling weeds to give my desirable plants a chance. Little by little, my good plants are choking out the weeds. To make sure I have the right plant in the right place, I have to recognize that different areas of my yard have very different soil, sun, and moisture conditions. So I keep that in mind as I choose plants. I've purchased plants from native plant nurseries in person, online, and at plant sales. And I've gotten beautiful plants from friends and neighbors. I've also planted many from seed, in some cases using the winter sown methods of growing in milk cartons left outside for the winter with little care or attention. This oak leaf hydrangea just loves the partial shade and moist conditions under my kitchen window. For a good part of the year, my yard looks like nothing but weeds to the untrained eye. So to show intent, I added pathways, an arbor, yard art, and plant identification tags. I certified my yard with the National Wildlife Federation and posted a sign by the front entrance, using it to inform and educate passers-by. Have fun. Don't do this if you don't love being outside, digging in the dirt and learning something new every day. I also added whimsical yard art and signs just for fun. Of course, there were challenges along the way. Some of the challenges were a sloped terrain, disease, wildlife, the wrong plants for the wrong place, and getting year-round bloom. Because of the sloped terrain, the yard is difficult to navigate and to control erosion. To mitigate these problems, I added 2 small rain gardens to help catch and slow down the rainwater. We also added 2 French drains and a stone patio under the bird feeders. For safety reasons, we added a railing alongside the steep front steps. I do not use fungicides or any other chemicals on my plants, so I remove anything that appears to be diseased. I have a lot to learn in this area. Most native plants, if put in the right place, will be disease-free. For the most part, attracting wildlife is the reason for my garden. I have learned that aphids are okay because they provide food for the milkweed bug or for the birds. Moles eat insects and may upset your plants or leave a raised tunnel in your lawn. But since I don't have a lawn, they aren't a problem. Snakes give me the creeps, but most snakes in your garden, like this one, are beneficial. They eat mice and moles and other small creatures. So I generally leave the wildlife alone, and if they eat up something that I want, I just plant more. Ideally, you should have something in bloom for 3 seasons of the year to support pollinators. A plant's bloom time can vary greatly depending on location and conditions, and it takes a lot of experience to determine. I keep a journal of everything I have planted and when it blooms each year, and I try to fill in the gaps by purchasing more plants. Oftentimes, because my yard is so big, I have 10 species in bloom, but my yard looks bare. I'm now working on filling in where needed. The wrong plants in the wrong place are usually planted by me. This lovely bottle brush grass that I grew from seed got knocked over onto my sidewalk every time it rained. I eventually moved it and replaced it with much shorter violets. This is why I garden, and these are some of the plants and visitors you will find in my yard. I do have a few non-natives, but they are herbs or plants that were gifts from my friends and neighbors that remind me of our friendships every time I see them bloom. My yard has come a long way since 2012, but it remains a work in progress. I made a note in my journal that gardening encourages some of the best virtues in us: patience, tolerance, optimism, appreciation, persistence, and humility. The more I learn, the more I know I have to learn. As you can see, anyone can plant a native garden, large or small. All it takes is a little research, a bit of work, and lots of enthusiasm.